All right, guys, we are back again. COVID Cabal. October 22nd, 2025. It is good to see you guys. If you are here, as always, leave a comment in the chat. If you're here, leave a comment in the chat. You know how it is. You know how we roll. You know what we're doing here. We got a bottle of Navarra Bianco. Oh no, look at this. I gotta fix this. We got a bottle of some Spanish white we're working with here. If you guys are here, leave a comment in the chat. If you're here, leave a comment in the chat. We got a fun show today. We got some fun stuff to talk about. Geopolitical analysis. I know you guys love that part of COVID Cabal. That's the good part of COVID Cabal. Drop a comment in the chat if you guys are here. I want to see who's here. Very nice. Very, very nice. Actually is like smells a little bit like grape, which is not normal for a vinifera wine. That's really nice. I'm trying to think of the flower that is. It's almost like lilac. It's almost like lilac. White grape and lilac. It's very, very good. It's very, very good. Fox Forgers here from Russia. You are up too late. You are up too late, but don't worry. You're going to be the only one who's going to be up next in a few months when I'm in Poland. Guys, COVID Cabal is going to have to move earlier in the day. I don't know what else to say. It's going to have to happen. Unfortunately, I'll be in European time zone. But we will we just got to do what we got to do. We got to keep it moving. Someone did say COVID Cabal, Jose. It's COVID Cabal time. Seth, COVID Cabal time. Let's go, Motocross. Hey, Pat, what's up? Hey, love to talk to you today, man. Love to talk to you today. Let's dive right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is this is a big blast from the past, COVID Cabal Season 1, which, of course, is the Dominion voting machines. So we have some developments going on over there. So you guys remember all the lawsuits against Sidney Powell, Mike Lindell, defamation, right? They hit even, I think, Fox News, if I'm correct about that. Fox News, cucked to it. The feds just indicted Smartmatic. That would be the company whose lawsuit against me for defamation and seeking over $1 billion was filed in DC 2021. Yes, they are now indicted. And it's interesting. We saw the tea leaves with this just a few weeks ago, and we saw like a fire sale for the company. Well, there's even more. The Dominion office in Serbia. You guys remember from COVID Cabal Season 1, we were talking about this, how Serbia was an anchor point for so much of the theft, that it was routed through Serbia. And it's so funny because like when you go back, like it feels like this stuff, we were just so crazy. And now this stuff is coming out. It's coming out that the things that we were aware of, if they're not entirely accurate, they were like 80% accurate. But everyone thought we were crazy. They still think we're crazy, but by the way, but they won't by the end. They won't by the end. Dominion office in Serbia cleared out. And then Rasmussen reports, right? Dominion office, they denied having they denied having the Serbia office, right? Until their discovery docs were sent to law enforcement who's published them. Hold on, let me see here. Yeah. They were trying to basically say none of these people existed, but people grabbed their stuff from LinkedIn that showed that they were actually working there and tried to pretend that the office didn't exist. So I mentioned this before we get into our bigger analysis for the show today, because I want everything to be anchored in the point that things are moving on multiple fronts simultaneously. They're moving in multiple fronts simultaneously. So I think that Trump, I don't I think Mandami's going to be elected mayor. I don't know how long he's going to be mayor. And what I mean by that is, I don't know. I'm not saying I know the exact approach that Trump's going to take, but he made a very interesting comment. He can be mayor, but we still have a say, basically. And it was like, wait, what do you mean by that? You can take that in a very mild allusion. It's very Trumpian, right? To not know exactly what he's referring to. Does it just mean that the federal government can, push around New York City? Or does he mean something else entirely? And I think that so much of everybody knows that the fight's going to happen. Like the way you have to look at this is you have to look at the board. We're at war. Okay, that's the first thing we have to understand. People say it's going to be World War III. We are at war. We have been at war. It's just fifth generation warfare. We have been at war since COVID, minimum since COVID. I think COVID is probably, I think you can say Trump's first term was prelude to war. But I really think that COVID was an attack by the deep state, China, whatever. And we are at war essentially now. And we've been at war. It's never stopped. It's just a different kind of warfare. We have to wrap our head around this, the fact that we're dealing with a totally different way of operating. Okay. So this is important, obviously, for the fact that it's better to know that you're in a war than not. I certainly felt like I was in a war. That's for sure. So in a war, there's multiple fronts, and that battles are going to happen. Okay, when you have a front, that there's eventually going to be a battle. The only thing is, when is the battle going to happen? And I think this is the key thing here. I believe that the cabal wants Davos, right? They want this to happen sooner because they have been trying to bait Trump from the beginning, and a lot of the people on the right fall for it because, let's be honest, a lot of them are very neurotic and impatient, and they want to see things happen yesterday. I get it. We hate dealing with this, but it's a taunting, and discipline is the big thing in war. And I'm going to tell you this as somebody who you could argue failed a test of discipline. You need to know when to hold back. They will try to get you to fall out of formation. They'll try to get you to attack prematurely, because if you have the initiative and if you stay in formation and you have the initiative, then you will win the battle. The most disciplined armies are the ones that win battles, because eventually things get intense enough that undisciplined people, they do reckless decisions, and then they do something reckless, and then they panic and they flee. A disciplined army is not reckless. It's courageous. It actually takes a lot of courage to be disciplined under fire. I want you guys to think about this for a second. Like, can you imagine the discipline it took to be in lines, right? They understood that up until the Civil War, essentially, when it started to become more of a problem because of the changing in rifling, right, with weapons. But up until the Civil War, the reason that people fought in lines is because you would actually, muskets were inaccurate after a certain range. And the only way that you could ever concentrate fire with infantry to destroy a position would be to have infantry amassed like that. Now, of course, the reason that is hard to do is because you might have your line when you're attacking. They're not just saying, go and attack, go and fire, go and fire, Eventually it breaks down into that to some extent. But they would actually say, like, they would train them that they had to go there and they would literally get to a certain point, and then they would have to receive fire from one side. And so can you imagine that? You're just there and you're waiting for the other side, and they're going to fire at you. And then you go and fire at them. And yes, there were modifications on these tactics, et cetera, fire, retreat. But the bottom line is that was not standard warfare. And it wasn't standard warfare because in most situations, the more disciplined army that would stand there and take the fire was the one that won the exchange. It was actually a fight over will to some extent. It was concentration of firepower, but it was also will. Okay? So we were dealing with the same thing in this conflict. We're dealing with the same thing. And the fight's happening on multiple different domains. While the cabal is trying to create civil war in America, we are trying to break apart the European Union. That's one of the reasons that the election of Nawrocki in Poland was so important, because Nawrocki is part of the party in Poland that is resistant to the European Union. It's part of the support for Hungary. It's also part of the support for Giorgia Meloni on the southern flank of Europe. And Tom Luongo, as always, has done a very good job of pointing out how the bond markets are reflecting this stuff. I think one of the great contributions that Tom has made is pointing out how Canada is being basically used for demolition against the United States. They're using Canada's trade imbalance with the United States to buy up U.S. treasuries and then to sell those U.S. treasuries, basically using these treasuries to prop up the Bank of England and the pound euro spread. Okay, I know this is complicated stuff and I'm glossing through it, but the point is that they're using Canada essentially as a mechanism to be able to prop up the London pound euro spread and ultimately the euro itself against the dollar. I think what's so really interesting about this is everybody talked about the dollar. The dollar's weak, the dollar's collapsing. This is all propaganda. A lot of this stuff was strategic. It was strategic. And you can see that, everybody says, oh, no one's going to be using the dollar anymore. Like, that's not accurate. It's not accurate. I'm going to show you guys something real quick. And you can see this. It's actually not dollars that people are getting rid of. They're getting rid of euros. And this is the process, and it's accelerating. And, it's very interesting, isn't it, that during the Biden years, the euro was in its strongest sort of range. And now, towards the end, now it's really started to break away. Hasn't it? Hasn't it broken away? Okay. This is important because these currencies make a big difference on whether the countries are able to sustain themselves in this fight. So when Trump doesn't move fast on a front, it's because he knows that there is no advantage to moving faster. It's better to have all your ducks in the row. It's better to have all the personnel in place to root out the scoundrels in these various organizations. Let's get the board more and more set, not just geopolitically, not just militarily, not just economically, not just with personnel, but also with public opinion. They want us to move too fast. We can't move too slow. We have to move. We have to take action. We don't need to take action yesterday because time is on our side and it is not on their side. You can see the riots in Ireland recently to show that. You can, which basically what happened in Ireland is that you had a migrant who was supposed to be deported and was not deported, still was kept in a luxury hotel, and he raped a 10-year-old girl. The Irish are revolting about this. France cannot form a government right now. And most of the people in France, we're talking on given polls on the subject, anywhere from 2/3 to 85% think democracy is no longer effective in the country, right? It's not going to work. I've been saying this on this show for a while. And honestly, it's a growing opinion among people who are younger that it's not going to, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to survive. How do you have it with communists? I don't want to belabor this, but the point is that these systems are collapsing. They're absolutely collapsing. Tom has an interesting thesis that the euros that there might be a possibility that they will use the collapse of France to try to roll it into the European Union. he's not saying that that's what's going to happen, but he's throwing it out there as an idea. I think it's very interesting. Are they going to try to use that as the mechanism to give the European Union more power? That the state itself cannot function, so it's going to give its power to the EU. If this is the case, I mean, you can just see that they're totally fucked if this is the case. Because if this is the case, then what you're seeing is them anchored very, very tinily into essentially a a Brussels box. They might get Germany, they might get France. Are they going to be able to get more than the sort of Benelux, the core European Union to go along? I don't know if this stuff is going to really last, because Eastern Europe's not going with it. Italy isn't going with it. And I see this, one of the things that came to mind is that just as Davos is trying to break apart the United States, they're focusing on these blue states, these blue cities, to try to fragment the country, right? Trump is doing the same thing with the European Union. So you can see they're both hitting each other, trying to break apart the other one. Whether it's coming from Brexit, whether it's coming from, from these initiatives. So it's interesting to see, but we do have to remember that we can't rush anything. We can't rush it. We have to be decisive, but we can't rush, because if we panic, so to speak, we're going to give them the initiative. And I'm going to make one last point here before I go into the deeper geopolitical analysis with China and South America, which is really what I wanted to get into on the show, is that a lot of people who I respect, by the way, want to make that point. Sam Hyde, right? A lot of people in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk, and we all wanted action. We all wanted action, and we have been getting action in the designation of Antifa as a terror organization, and we're starting to see the first indictments with that. But what I want to emphasize here is that these people were wrong. These people were wrong, and they were wrong not because they were bad people or they had their heart in the wrong place. Certainly not that. They were wrong because they didn't understand how the government works, even when they really want it to work, even when you have everything moving the way you want it to move. It's, Vance has hinted himself that the government bureaucracy is not supporting a lot of their efforts. So they can't rush through everything in a way that's very sloppy, and especially in situations where they're going to get resistance. We still don't have a lot of resolution on what exactly is going on in the DOJ. There are things that need to be sorted out. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be sorted out if they're not important. I'm not even saying people shouldn't chimp out. I think that that whole mantra, chimp out and trust the plan, is absolutely correct. Like, you do both simultaneously. But I'm saying this because we didn't have to arrest every, and I was guilty of this too, to an extent, right? We didn't have to arrest every single Democratic Party leader or whatever in the next 2 weeks. We have to do it, not every single one. We have to arrest a lot of these individuals, but you need to make sure you're doing it correctly. And, Alexander Mercouris, I think, said this, but, there's a difference between economic time, political time, and legal time. So the time it takes to get a resolution legally is not the amount of time it takes to say you want something done. I can tell you that firsthand. I mean, they prepared my indictments early on, but they got a lot of help from people ratting on me because I was public. I didn't get my superseding indictment till, another 4.5 months on the felony. And I didn't go to trial until another 2 years after my superseding indictment. So these things can take a long time. They can take a long time to work their way through. And we have to just be aware of that. We have to brace ourselves for the long fight, because it is a long fight, with always having confidence that we're going to win. I just don't think that people appreciate that even though we have the advantage, it is not an advantage that cannot be squandered. There are a million different ways for them to lose this, and there's only like one with minor variation for them to win. This administration cannot make a lot of mistakes. They have the advantage, but they cannot make a lot of mistakes. You cannot give them an opening to reestablish themselves. And it's much more important for us to wait and take a few extra hits if they mean that we will actually crush them completely. You have to keep that in mind. What answer some of these chat questions before we move to the next section here? Civil war across Europe. I think with the migration stuff's obviously going to come to a head. I mean, I think it's a bare minimum. I'm going to say it straight up. I think it's a bare minimum that any non-ethnic, non-European who has been a net taker in any European country is gone. It's gone. I see that so clear as day. There's no sympathy left. No one's going to give a fuck. They're just not going to give a fuck. And if you can't prove that you assimilated and that you contributed, you're just fucking out. I don't even actually think that there's a moral conversation around this. I don't think that there's any, well, they built their life. I don't really give a fuck. You're a parasite. You are living in a foreign country and you're a fucking parasite. Like you're out. You do not have any basis to make an argument. I think once you get past that step, and then you have people who came in and they did contribute and they did assimilate. Now I think you get into like difficult moral ground. And I'm not going to pretend I have an answer for that. All I will say is that the more everybody gets on board with getting rid of the parasites, the less there's going to be an issue for the people who probably deserve to stay on at least an individual basis. I think the moral difficulty is this. Are they affecting on an individual basis? They've been good, but have they, at a certain point, do they actually, even if they've been good on an individual basis, do they affect the country itself in a way that's bad simply because it's different and we're trying to preserve diversity? Actually, that's where you get into the difficult moral ground. Is should an individual be punished for no fault of their own because they detract from the difference in a society? And I think in healthy times, they never do really detract from it. But the question will just becomes a matter of numbers, right? It becomes a matter of numbers and degree. But yeah, I would, on a personal level, I would prefer that not to happen to at least most of those people. But we'll see where it goes. But this is where it's going. And so when we talk about civil war in Europe, there's not going to be there's going to be issues. But the real civil war is against the communists, because the communists are the ones that support this. I don't really think that the migrants really have a leg to stand on. They're totally dependent on the state. You take control of the state, they're fucked. I really think that they're fucked. I think that they're actually so spoiled. They're so used to being able to appeal to authority. I really think that they are so fucked the second that Westerners don't care. So if Westerners don't care and they reclaim control of the institutions, they are so unbelievably fucked. And, the comparisons to the Reconquista, I think, are overstated in the opposite direction, because at that time you were dealing with really warriors who took over land themselves, controlled the cities through force, right? These are people, they're dependent on payments from the state. Like, you just take control of the state and it's over. Okay, well, are they going to take control of the state? Well, Trump controls America. He controls the real state. So I think it's going to be all right. Where can I find news sites or individual publications that talk about COVID cabal news? I don't know. Probably on like some like shitlib site that, no one follows it. No one follows it. No one's gonna talk about the. You just gotta show up for COVID cabal and catch the replay. Catch the replay. All right. Now let's start. We got Train Companion here saying always be chimping. Parasites will get behind Islamists when the states end the gravy train. Yeah, I think that's right. But there's going to be a fight. There's going to be a fight. What about EBT? You think they'll let it run out? That's a really interesting question. I don't know. I actually think that that's what the Democrats want, because you have to think about this strategically. And by the way, I think the administration hasn't gone far enough. Why are more civil servants not being fired? Right? Why are more not being fired? They fired some, but I was expecting more than we've gotten. Maybe it will come to that. Maybe they're just drawing it out. But I actually think the Democrats are waiting because they want to push it to a point where it's never gone before. Because then people will stop caring. They'll stop. That's what they think. People will stop caring. I'll just say this: Trump has no incentive. Really, he doesn't have much of an incentive to, keep this stuff going, because these are demographics that are not really going to support him anyway, for the most part. Being blunt, they're not. You punish your enemies, you reward your friends. People on EBT are not voting for Trump. They're not. 90% are not voting for Trump. So, but is it going to cause more chaos? Sure. Could cause some more chaos. It's a good question. I mean, I've been thinking about it myself. I don't know if he's going to take it that far. This gets into the timing question. He'll only let it go that far if he's prepared to fight the big battles that are going to result from that. If he's not, then maybe he'll pull back. But here's the thing: how can he pull back? He's not going to fund things for illegals. So I think all it does is, if it's a matter of whether the Democrats, he's going to have to put so much pressure. He's going to have to hurt the Democrats so badly for letting the shutdown get to that point, that also creates a PR thing. So he says, look, we're not reopening the government because they want to give stuff to healthcare workers, but we're going to try to keep EBT going on by firing all these other people, right? That's how I think he pulls it off. And he just keeps hitting their flank, hitting their flank, hitting their flank. I don't know if it's going to work on that demographic, having spent a lot of time with them in prison. It's just being blunt, it's very simplistic. It's a very simplistic worldview. Trump gave stimulus checks. They like Trump. Trump takes away EBT. They hate Trump. It's really, that's how simple it gets. That's for most of them, that's where their politics lives and dies, on whether they got money. So hate to say that, but that's the way it is. So moving to the main topic of discussion is the big purge in China. And this is really, really significant. I'm going to show some stuff on here. So first we had CCP's military top ranks all getting purged, Central Military Commission. And we're going to move to the shipwreck comment up here. This could be about Xi losing the oil supply from Venezuela with increased activity by U.S. forces. We also saw the trade negotiator with the U.S. get removed after Trump and Besant kind of called him out, right? As being, basically an ineffective idiot. I think that what this is telling us is pretty clear. And especially when you put this in together with Trump's comment here on Colombia. So Colombia is an illegal drug leader, strongly encouraging the massive production of drugs in big and small fields all over Colombia. It has become the biggest business in Colombia by far, and Pedro does nothing to stop it despite large-scale payments and subsidies from the USA that are now nothing more than a long-term ripoff for America. As of today, these payments or any other form of payment or subsidies will no longer be made to Colombia. The purpose of this drug production is the sale of massive amounts of product into the United States, causing death, destruction, and havoc. Pedro, a low-rated and very unpopular leader with a fresh mouth towards America, better close up these killing fields immediately, or the United States will close them up for him, and it won't be done nicely. Thank you for this attention, for your attention to this matter. Okay, so you see there's some stuff in the top here. There's a whole thread. I'm not going to read it because it's too long. I'm just going to summarize some of this stuff because it was very good analysis. I was trying to think about this. So everything with Venezuela and Colombia and Guyana and the Panama Canal and China, it's all related. Okay, there's a lot of very key components and metals in that region that China wants. China also wants control of the sea lanes. You get back to it, it's always sea lanes. Remember the big issue before, during the election, Trump in Panama Canal, China was starting to take over the Panama Canal. Trump said, no, you're getting the fuck out. Okay? One of the reasons that Trump is focusing his priorities on the Americas is obviously it's easier force projection. But it's also because the most key sea lane in the entire world is the Panama Canal. You can argue the Suez's and the Straits of Malacca are also super important, and they are. But the Panama Canal is right in our backyard. And it is, you know, it's even more important because you can go around the Cape of Good Hope without too big of a deal. You really can't go around Cape Horn. You can't really go around Argentina. The winds are too fierce. It's very dangerous for shipping to go around there. It's also a much greater distance. So something happens to the Suez, it's a big impact on the global economy. People can still go around South Africa. Something happens at the Strait of Malacca, it's an inconvenience. They can go around other places. The Panama Canal is a true choke point. And the only other alternative that they're trying to develop is the Northwest Passage, which, of course, is a thing that Russia and the United States are also trying to work on, and it's part of the whole push with Canada. So there's very many strategic reasons for America to take control of Panama. It's not just about, in this whole area, it's not just about the drug flow into the United States. That's the superficial thing, and it's not superficial because it's real, but the deeper layers are the resources. There has been a long-standing dispute between Guyana and Venezuela over a region, and this region has a lot of very valuable resources to it. And you know, China's had itself in this entire area. Trump's aggressive posture towards Venezuela and now Colombia is very much connected to the collapse of a lot of this military brass in China. China's losing this war. They're losing it. And I'm going to bring it all back to what we talked about before, which is that things are being sped up in some areas and slowed down in others. Trump is the Davos wants things to come to a head faster in America. Trump is slowing it down. Internationally, China wants things to happen slower. Trump's speeding it up. Trump is pushing the issue on a lot of things. When you saw China ban rare earth metals to America, they backpedaled on that really quickly, didn't they? They did because they were not able to deal with the retaliation because America had so much leverage over the rest of the world still that it rebounded badly on China, which is why China is now retreated into a defensive posture. And by the way, as we talked about on the last show, I believe China has serious issues with deflation. So look, I'm not saying that China is like over as a country or anything like that. China's a great power and they're going to be fine. Let's not kid ourselves. China's going to be fine. But China's expansionism is over. In the short term, it's over. It's over. Trump and Besant, Rubio, Trump's team, like they are, it's a masterpiece. And when I've said this, it's like, I've said this to people, it's not to me that Trump is not going to, after Trump, we won't have any balls. I actually think there's plenty of balls in the younger generation in MAGA to continue this fight. I see it. There's plenty of balls. I don't know if there's this genius. This is genius. It's really, it's statecraft on the highest level. And you got to respect it. As somebody who studied this stuff, whole first half of my life, I really respect it. I really respect this. He understands the corridors. He's making Venezuela and Colombia his bitch. I mean, he humiliated them recently, just in a news conference. Said, is it true that the president of Colombia asked you not to do this? Yeah, he begged like a fucking bitch because, he doesn't want to mess with the United States of America. He gave me everything. And it still wasn't enough, right? Yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough. These countries were being used as outposts for the cabal and for China. And we're using direct force against them and indirect force elsewhere in the world. But we're using much more concentrated force on this area because it's in our backyard, and they're just not going to have any time for it. They're blowing up. They're going to blow up the drug ships. And so when people like Rand Paul make an issue out of this, when they made no issue out of Obama drone striking people around the world, you really have to ask yourself, is this a good person? Is this a patriot? Is it a patriot? Or is this somebody who's captured in working for someone else? And I hate to say that. No one wants to say that about Rand, right? It's kind of weird, isn't it? It's kind of weird. The second the president of the United States defends America, now you're going to get all high and mighty. But you didn't when he was blowing up people in Afghanistan. Very interesting. Speaking of Afghanistan, last closing thought, Trump's trying to get that base back, the Taliban. That'll be a big coup because we know that most of that $80 billion in equipment went to China. So if Trump gets himself back in with the Taliban government, lets the Taliban have the government, keep the government, no regime change, but give us back the base, that's a sign that he's also flipped around China a piece on the chessboard. And by the way, that's important also because that is also related to Pakistan. Fox, most of the stuff, nothing was done officially, but it's well established that when we dumped all that equipment there, the Chinese were coming in and taking the material from it very quickly. It's not just about the material itself. A lot of the material was left there, but the technology, I should be more precise. The technology was given to China. It's not most of the material was either kept by the Taliban or sold, but the technology in some of those materials, we had some like very, very advanced stuff that we just left there. We didn't even blow it up, just left it there. Yeah, reverse engineering, exactly. So, if and when China can no longer prop up its currency because of deflation and currency outflows, the safer investment countries, they will devalue their own currency, which will speed up China's economic collapse. Watch for devaluation to come. When it does, that's a sign that they are buckling under international pressures, especially from America. And the last thing I'll say with this, by the way, just to feed into it, is that part of the strategy is to have an offshore dollar that is still used as like a, they're gonna let gold rise, they're gonna let Bitcoin rise, silver as well, right? But there's going to be an offshore dollar market and there's going to be a domestic dollar market. And we'll talk about that maybe more on another show, but that's part of how Trump is going to insulate America from a lot of the things that are happening abroad and what's happening inside the country, and also to incentivize investment. There'll be lower investment, there'll be lower interest rates domestically than abroad. So there'll be more incentive to bring money into the country. I might have that. I think I have that backwards actually, but there's going to be incentives because of the different valuations internally and externally for investment to go into America. If people want more dollars, they're going to have to invest in the country, basically, is the point. So it's really a masterpiece when you look at it. We'll talk more about that next time, though. I think it's a good thing to go into in more detail. I got to jump for now. He wants the base. He wants the base because the base is in a very strategic location. That's why everyone's always wanted Afghanistan. It's between Iran, subcontinent, it borders China. It's a huge nexus point. So take care, guys. I'll see you next time. See you next week.